Captain James Cook was a British naval officer, explorer, and map-maker who lived from 1728 to 1779. He led 3 major voyages across the Pacific and Southern Oceans between 1768 and 1779. During these journeys, he became the first person to complete a full mapping of New Zealand's main islands and the first recorded European to reach the east coast of Australia and the Hawaiian Islands. Cook began his career as a teenager in the British Merchant Navy before joining the Royal Navy in 1755. He first saw battle during the 7 Years' War, taking part in the siege of Louisbourg, and later helping to map the entrance to the St. Lawrence River during the siege of Quebec. In the 1760s, he charted the coast of Newfoundland with great accuracy and made valuable astronomical observations. His skill and precision earned him recognition from both the British Admiralty and the Royal Society. This reputation led to his appointment in 1768 as the commander of the ship HMS Endeavour, marking the start of his first great voyage of discovery. Over the course of his 3 expeditions, Cook traveled tens of thousands of miles through regions that were largely unknown to Europeans. He carefully mapped coastlines, islands, and seas, including places such as Easter Island, Alaska, and South Georgia Island. He met and traded with many indigenous peoples and claimed new territories in the name of Great Britain. Cook was admired for his exceptional navigation and leadership, as well as for his calmness and persistence in difficult situations, though he could be strict and quick-tempered when discipline was needed. His innovative methods for preventing scurvy, a common illness among sailors, earned him the Copley Gold Medal from the Royal Society. In 1779, during his second visit to Hawaii, a conflict broke out between his crew and the local people, and Cook was killed during the confrontation. Despite his tragic death, his voyages transformed the understanding of the world. His detailed maps and scientific observations expanded knowledge of the Pacific and influenced explorers, scientists, and navigators for generations to come. Today, memorials to Captain Cook stand in many parts of the world, honoring his remarkable achievements in exploration and discovery. James Cook was born on the 7th of November, 1728, in the village of Marton in Yorkshire, about 8 miles from the sea. He was the second of 8 children born to James Cook, a Scottish farm worker, and his wife, Grace Pace, from Thornaby-on-Tees. In 1736, the family moved to Airy Home Farm near Great Ayton, where Cook's father became a farm manager. His employer, Thomas Scotto, paid for young James to attend a local charity school. After 5 years of schooling, Cook began working with his father on the farm. At the age of 16, Cook left home to work as an apprentice for a grocer and haberdasher named William Sanderson in the fishing village of Staithes. After about a year and a half, he realized shop work was not for him and moved to the nearby port of Whitby, where Sanderson introduced him to the Walker brothers, who owned ships used in the coal trade. Cook became an apprentice sailor in their small fleet, carrying coal along the English coast. His first ship was the Freelove, and during his years at sea he learned navigation, mathematics, astronomy, and geometry, skills that later made him an excellent navigator. After finishing his 3-year apprenticeship, Cook worked on merchant ships sailing to the Baltic Sea. In 1752, after earning his mariner's license, he was promoted to mate and served on the Friendship, a collier ship. Over the next few years, he sailed to ports in Norway and the Netherlands and became experienced in handling ships in shallow coastal waters and in the English Channel. At 26, Cook was offered command of the Friendship, but instead he chose to join the Royal Navy in 1755. Britain was preparing for the 7 Years' War, and the Navy was expanding. Cook's first assignment was aboard HMS Eagle, where he served as a seaman and later as master's mate. He took part in capturing and sinking French ships during the early stages of the war. In 1756, he temporarily commanded a small vessel called the cruiser, and by 1757, he passed the rigorous master's examination, qualifying him to navigate and command naval ships. He was then appointed master of HMS Solebay under Captain Robert Craig. During the 7 Years' War, Cook served on HMS Pembroke in North America. In 1758, he helped capture the French fortress of Louisbourg in Nova Scotia. There he met Samuel Holland, an Army officer skilled in surveying, who taught him new mapping techniques. Together they charted parts of the St. Lawrence River, and Cook wrote the sailing directions that accompanied the maps. His first printed chart, a map of Gaspé Bay, appeared in 1759 and was praised for its precision. By combining Holland's land surveying with his own expertise in sea navigation, Cook developed a style of chart-making far more accurate than most maps of his time. In 1759, Cook took depth measurements and marked dangerous shoals near Quebec, helping British forces under General James Wolfe launch a surprise attack across the river. This work contributed directly to the British victory at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham. After the war, Cook was sent to chart the coast of Newfoundland. As master of HMS Grenville, he spent 5 summers mapping the island's coastlines. Between 1763 and 1767, he surveyed the northwest, south, and west coasts, working with local pilots who helped him avoid dangerous rocks and reefs. During this time, he suffered a serious hand injury from a gunpowder explosion and experienced several ship groundings, but he always managed to recover and continue his work. Cook's attention to detail extended to astronomy. In 1766, while observing a solar eclipse in Newfoundland, he carefully recorded the exact times of the event and sent his results to English astronomer John Bevis. The data helped determine the difference in longitude between Newfoundland and Oxford, which Cook then used to improve his navigation charts. In 1767, while returning from his final surveying season, Cook's ship, the Grenville, was caught in a violent storm near the Thames River. The ship ran aground, and the crew had to abandon it temporarily. Once the storm passed, they managed to refloat and repair the vessel before safely returning to port. Cook's skill, precision, and calmness during these years of service established his reputation as one of the finest navigators and mapmakers in the British Navy, paving the way for his later voyages of exploration. James Cook's achievements in North America as both a surveyor and an astronomer earned him great respect from the British Admiralty. His work came at an important time, as Britain was beginning to focus on exploring the Pacific Ocean. By the mid-17th century, Europeans had mapped parts of the Pacific's outer regions and traded with places such as the Philippines and the Spice Islands, but much of the ocean remained a mystery. Questions still existed about whether a Northwest Passage linked the Atlantic and Pacific, whether a great southern continent called Terra Australis existed, and what unknown lands and cultures might lie across the central Pacific. After the 7 Years' War ended in 1763, the Treaty of Paris allowed the Royal Navy to shift its efforts from war to exploration. Britain began sending expeditions to the Pacific, including those led by John Byron, Samuel Wallis, and Philip Carteret. Their reports of Tahiti and possible sightings of a southern continent inspired a new voyage, one that would soon be commanded by James Cook. Cook's first great journey, aboard HMS Endeavour, lasted from 1768 to 1771. The expedition was sponsored by both the Royal Navy and the Royal Society. Its main purpose was to travel to Tahiti to observe the transit of Venus, an important event for measuring the size of the solar system. However, Cook also carried secret orders to search for the unknown southern continent and claim any new lands for Britain. The ship selected for the voyage was a sturdy merchant collier named the Earl of Pembroke, renamed Endeavour. It was chosen for its strength, large cargo space, and shallow draft, which allowed it to sail close to shore. Cook, then 39 years old, was promoted to lieutenant and given command of the ship. The Endeavour carried 73 sailors and 12 Marines. Among them were the astronomer Charles Green and the young naturalist Joseph Banks, who brought his own team of scientists and artists. The ship left England on the 25th of August, 1768, and sailed south around Cape Horn into the Pacific. On the way, they stopped at Tierra del Fuego, where Cook wrote about the local people and their harsh living conditions. During the visit, 2 of Banks's servants died from the cold. In April 1769, the expedition reached Tahiti and successfully observed the transit of Venus. While there, Cook and his crew witnessed local people surfing, becoming the first Europeans to see the sport. Relations with the Tahitians were mostly peaceful, though there were several misunderstandings and small conflicts. Cook claimed nearby islands, including Huahine, Raiatea, and Bora Bora for Britain, naming them the Society Islands. After leaving Tahiti, Cook turned his attention to the search for the southern continent. He sailed southwest and reached New Zealand in October 1769. Landing at Poverty Bay, he made contact with the Maori people with the help of a Tahitian navigator named Tupaia. However, the first encounters were violent, resulting in several Maori deaths. Cook tried to promote peaceful exchange through gifts and communication, but he also responded with force when his men were threatened. Over the following months, he mapped both of New Zealand's main islands, confirmed that they were separated by a strait, and completed the first full circumnavigation of the islands. In early 1770, Cook continued west across the Tasman Sea and sighted the east coast of Australia on the 19th of April. The crew of the Endeavour became the first Europeans to see this part of the continent. They sailed north, carefully charting the coastline. On the 29th of April, they landed at Botany Bay, where they met the Guigal people. A brief clash occurred when the locals tried to drive the visitors away, and one man was injured. Cook and his crew stayed for a week, collecting plants and exploring the area, but they concluded that the Aboriginal people wanted them to leave. Sailing north again, the Endeavour passed through the treacherous waters of the Great Barrier Reef. On the 11th of June, 1770, the ship struck the reef and was badly damaged. To save it, the crew threw heavy items, including cannons, overboard to lighten the ship, and then patched the hull. They beached the vessel at the mouth of the Endeavour River and spent 7 weeks making repairs. During this time, Cook saw a kangaroo for the first time and recorded observations about it. There was limited contact with the local Gugu Yimithir people, though one argument over turtles led to shots being fired. Once the ship was repaired, Cook continued north to Cape York, at the northern tip of Australia. From a nearby island, which he named Possession Island, he claimed the entire eastern coast of Australia for Great Britain. Afterward, the expedition sailed through the Torres Strait and made its way home, completing a journey that would forever change the map of the Pacific and Britain's role in world exploration. In October 1770, after damaging his ship on the Great Barrier Reef, James Cook stopped at Batavia, today's Jakarta, to inspect and repair Endeavour. He left in late December, crossed to the Cape of Good Hope, then to St. Helena. where he arrived on the 30th of April, 1771. The stay in Batavia proved deadly. Disease swept through the crew. 7 men died there, and another 23 died on the voyage home, mostly from dysentery, with some cases likely due to tuberculosis and typhoid, often worsened by malaria. Endeavour anchored in the Downs on the 12th of July, 1771, and in August Cook was promoted to commander. A book based on his and Joseph Banks's journals appeared in 1773. In 1772, Cook was sent back to sea to settle whether a great southern continent existed. He planned to push far south in summer and retreat to warmer waters in winter. This time he chose 2 stout Whitby colliers, HMS Resolution under his own command and HMS Adventure under Tobias Furneaux. Resolution was heavily refitted with cutting-edge gear, including an azimuth compass, ice anchors, and a seawater distiller. Joseph Banks intended to go, but withdrew after ship modification disputes. The naturalists Johann Reinhold Forster and his son Georg took his place, alongside astronomer William Wales, carrying the new K1 chronometer, Lieutenant Charles Clerk, and artist William Hodges. The ships sailed via Cape Town and then east into high southern latitudes, aiming to sweep between about 50 and 70 degrees south. In late November 1772, they met their first icebergs, and Cook proved fresh water could be made by melting sea ice. On the 17th of January 1773, they became the first recorded Europeans to cross the Antarctic Circle. Although he never actually sighted Antarctica, at one point Cook came within about 75 miles of the continent. In heavy fog, the ships separated. Furneaux made for the rendezvous at Queen Charlotte Sound, New Zealand, where Cook rejoined him in May. Cook traded with Maori and worried his crews might be spreading disease and encouraging prostitution. In June, the ships left New Zealand to resume the search. Scurvy struck Adventure because Furneaux ignored Cook's dietary regime. After stopping at Tahiti and Tonga, a storm split the ships again. Cook waited 3 weeks at the rendezvous point, then continued alone. Furneaux arrived 5 weeks late. In December 1773, 10 men from Adventure were killed during a violent clash ashore. Furneaux chose not to take revenge and returned to Britain. Later, when Cook learned of the killings, he wondered if his own men might have provoked the incident, noting that he had generally found Maori brave and generous. Resolution then made a great anti-clockwise sweep of the South Pacific. In January 1774, Cook reached 71 degrees 10 minutes south, but was blocked by solid pack ice and wrote that attempting to go farther would be dangerously rash. He fell seriously ill the next month and recovered only slowly. He resupplied at Tonga, visited New Caledonia, claiming it for the king, and accidentally poisoned himself by eating a pufferfish liver, then recovered. Back in Queen Charlotte Sound, Maori mentioned a conflict with another ship, but Cook did not yet learn of Adventure's losses. He then headed home via South Georgia, which he charted and claimed, and the South Sandwich Islands, then rounded Africa to Britain. His results convinced most observers that no vast temperate southern continent existed. He was made a post captain, given an honorary post at Greenwich Hospital, with the option to return to sea, elected Fellow of the Royal Society, and awarded the Copley Gold Medal for his methods against scurvy. Books by Cook and the Forsters appeared in 1777. Cook's third voyage, starting in 1776, aimed to find a northwest passage from the Pacific. To conceal the purpose, the Admiralty publicly said he would return the Polynesian man Mai to Tahiti. Cook again commanded Resolution. Charles Clerk took Discovery. The officers included John Gore and James King. William Bligh served as master. William Anderson was surgeon and botanist. William Bailey was astronomer. John Webber was the artist. And among the midshipmen was George Vancouver. They sailed south around Africa, pausing at Kerguelen Island, where Cook found and updated a French message in a bottle, then continued to New Zealand and treated Maori respectfully despite knowing of adventure's dead. They returned Mai to Tahiti, where Cook witnessed a human sacrifice ritual, and in Moorea, he used harsh reprisals to recover a stolen goat, destroying many canoes and huts. Heading north, they became the first recorded Europeans to see Hawaii in January 1778, landing on Kauai and Niihau. A Hawaiian was shot by a crewman while ashore, angering Cook. He left pigs and seeds to introduce new food stocks and noted striking cultural similarities between Hawaii and Tahiti. He named the group the Sandwich Islands. From Hawaii, Cook turned to North America, sighting the Oregon coast and naming Cape Foulweather, then harboring at Nootka Sound before mapping north to Alaska and into the Bering Strait. He crossed the Arctic Circle and pressed to 70 degrees 41 minutes north before sea ice stopped him, then worked along the Siberian coast and back to the Bering Sea. By then he had charted most of the northwest coast and clarified Alaska's extent. Tired and increasingly severe, he returned to Hawaii in late 1778, where he was greeted by vast crowds at Kealakekua Bay. He met the High Chief Kalaniʻopuʻu, exchanged names and gifts, and some Hawaiians regarded him as the god Lono, partly because his arrival coincided with the Makahiki season, and his ship's rig resembled sacred symbols. After a month, a gale broke Resolution's foremast, forcing a return to Kealakekua Bay. Relations worsened, thefts increased, and on 13 February 1779, a ship's cutter was stolen. The next day, Cook tried to seize Kalaniʻopuʻu as a hostage to recover the boat. A crowd gathered. News arrived that a chief had been shot elsewhere in the bay. Tensions spiked. Cook fired a warning shot, then shot a Hawaiian, and fighting erupted. Cook and 4 Marines were killed. 17 Hawaiians also died. Hawaiians took the bodies inland. Through negotiation, some of Cook's remains, bones, charred flesh, and his scarred hands, were returned and buried at sea. Clerk took command and followed Cook's plan to survey the islands before sailing north again. He sent Cook's journal overland from Kamchatka to England, where news of Cook's death arrived 11 months before the ships. Unable to force a northwest passage because of ice, Clerk died of tuberculosis. John Gore assumed command of Resolution, and James King took Discovery. The expedition reached England on the 4th of October, 1780. Cook's seamanship and precise navigation carried 3 long expeditions across mostly uncharted seas without losing a single ship. His crews and scientists gathered thousands of plant specimens and produced pioneering interdisciplinary geographic studies. Cook and Banks compared cultures and languages across the Pacific and suggested a common Asian origin for many island peoples. Cook was an expert surveyor and instrument user, and his Newfoundland charts remained superior decades later. He sailed at a time when longitude methods were maturing. On his first voyage, he used the nautical almanac to speed lunar distance calculations. On his later voyages, he tested Kendall's K1 chronometer, which kept time so well it helped solve longitude at sea. He was also a leader in scurvy prevention, combining fresh foods, wort, and strict hygiene. He lost no men to scurvy on his first circumnavigation and received the Copley Medal for his work. Across the Pacific, he met many indigenous peoples. His orders stressed friendship, fair trade and restraint, with lethal force only as a last resort. He often began with gift-giving and relied on Polynesian intermediaries like Tupaya, Hitahiti, and Mai. Still, violence sometimes erupted, often over perceived threats or thefts of vital gear. Cook usually answered with warning shots, floggings, seizure of canoes, or taking hostages to secure returns, though at times punishments grew harsher. At least 45 indigenous people were killed by his crews, and 15 crewmen died in conflicts, including Cook. His ceremonial friendships with high chiefs gave him rank within local systems, but also drew him into politics and obligations he did not always grasp. In much of Polynesia, he was treated as a high chief, and in Hawaii, many believed he embodied Lono, a status tied to timing, ritual season, and the striking form of his ship. Cook's orders required him to trade peacefully with indigenous peoples to restock his ships with food and supplies. Through barter, he usually obtained fish, pigs, coconuts, bananas, plantains, and breadfruit. In return, he offered iron nails, beads, copper, knives, and cloth. The crew also traded privately, buying local goods and keepsakes, and sometimes paying for sex. Cook's ships carried many kinds of livestock such as pigs, goats, cattle, rabbits, horses, and sheep. These animals were used for food, breeding, and as gifts to local people. He also brought seeds and plants, including wheat, peas, potatoes, cabbages, carrots, and citrus fruits, and planted gardens on several islands so that both indigenous peoples and future visitors could benefit. Cook's voyages created major cultural exchanges. Some of his crew learned Polynesian languages, and words like taboo and tattoo entered English. Polynesians also picked up English words and nicknamed Cook Tute. They shared foods, dances, songs, and sports with each other, and some crew members joined in local boxing and wrestling. The sailors adopted tattooing, which later became a tradition among seafarers. Artists from the ships introduced European painting to Polynesians, while men like Tupaya and Mai traveled with Cook as cultural intermediaries. Cook attended indigenous ceremonies, and indigenous peoples sometimes took part in British burials and prayers. Friendships and romances developed between the visitors and local people, and a few sailors even tried to stay behind. Although European reports of these voyages were popular, they sometimes spread false or romanticized ideas about Pacific cultures. European contact also brought disease. Cook's crew, like other explorers, carried illnesses such as smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis, and venereal diseases. These infections spread to Pacific peoples, who had no immunity, and caused severe population loss. Sex between sailors and local women was common, usually involving exchange of gifts or goods. In some places, women believed relations with Europeans increased their spiritual power. Cook tried to stop the spread of disease by banning women from boarding his ships and ordering infected men to abstain. But his crew often ignored these rules. Cook carefully recorded what he observed about the peoples he met. Over time, his writing showed greater understanding and respect. He described the Maori as brave, generous, and open-hearted, and believed Aboriginal Australians were happier than Europeans because they lived in equality and peace with nature. He worried that European contact would corrupt local morals and bring unnecessary desires and diseases. He saw cannibalism among the Maori as a wartime custom rather than savagery, and recognized that Polynesians shared a common ancestry and history of ocean voyages. Though he sometimes used harsh language, he often challenged European stereotypes, arguing that many indigenous societies were orderly, resourceful, and content without European goods. In his personal life, Cook married Elizabeth Batts in 1762. They had 6 children, but none lived to have children of their own. Cook's widow later requested a coat of arms in his honor, which was granted in 1785, the only posthumous grant of its kind. Historians describe Cook as intelligent, disciplined, and courageous. He was calm in danger, frugal, and strict about moral conduct, rarely swore or drank, and remained celibate on his voyages. He valued duty and precision, but could be stubborn and quick-tempered when others disobeyed. Cook's legacy endures worldwide. Statues and monuments in places such as Sydney, Melbourne, and Cambridge honor him, though some have become controversial symbols of colonialism. His name lives on in universities, hospitals, and ships, and he has appeared on many stamps and coins. In Cooktown, Australia, locals still hold an annual reenactment of his 1770 landing, now focused on reconciliation with indigenous communities. Cook remains one of history's most famous navigators, both celebrated and debated for the global impact of his voyages.